You're listening to What It's Like with Luce, a podcast highlighting ordinary people doing extraordinary things. I'm your host, Lucy Norris, and on today's episode, I'm sitting down with founder of Westlakes Hemp, Cumbria's first CBD company. Throughout her life, this week's guest has been faced with adversity. Diagnosed in her teenage years with bipolar and later in her 20s with borderline personality disorder, it was out of her mental health conditions that her business was born. The turning point for her came in 2015 when Storm Desmond hit and quite literally washed away her life as she knew it before. Placed on suicide watch and struggling to cope, a doctor in America suggested trying cannabis, and from there everything took off. Researching into the healing effects of CBD oil and trying it out for herself, she was amazed with the dramatic results and set about creating an authentic retail outlet in order to help others. Talking me through everything, here's what it's like to be Nic Hewitt. Welcome, Nic. Thank you so much for coming on and chatting with me today. As we said before, you have such an incredible story to get through, but maybe if we could start at the very beginning, that's always a good place to go from, and chat a bit about what your experience was like growing up.
Yeah, so I am from Cumbria. I'm 34 now. I lived here from birth up until I was 18, and then I moved from Whitehaven to Preston to go to university. I did a degree in English language and literature.
Oh,
Then I
cool.
moved back home because I've got a severe, I don't know if you know, I've got severe mental health conditions. I've got a bipolar and borderline personality disorder.
Yeah.
So doing an education was quite difficult because I had to start and stop and start and stop. So I did my first degree, then I went back home again, and then I went to Liverpool John Moores University and I did a criminal justice degree. Then I had to take a little break. I was a probation service officer for a little while, and it didn't really work out because of my mental health. It was a high pressure job. I had to take some time off, and it didn't agree with the way that they worked. And then I went on to do some sort of like youth offending. I went into youth work, crisis work with I specialised in child sexual exploitation, which was heavy going. I did that for about 9 years. And then when I moved to Carlisle. So I did my first degree in Preston. Then I went to Liverpool. Then I moved back to Liverpool, and I was living between Liverpool and Manchester doing youth work with the gangs. And then I moved back to Carlisle in Cumbria, which was like, it was closer to home really, because Carlisle's only about 40 miles away from my mum and my dad and the rest of my family. And then I was flooded in Storm Desmond.
Yeah, that must have been crazy. I
Oh,
definitely
it was
want to.
mental.
Yeah, I definitely want to ask you about what that was like. First of all, maybe if you don't mind, can you chat to me a bit more about your mental health growing up and what it
Yeah,
was
of
like
course.
being diagnosed with that, and then how you learned to live with it, I suppose?
Yeah, it was really difficult in the beginning because I was sort of, I don't know if you remember puberty. Puberty is hard enough as it is.
Yeah.
But when you're sort of 15, 16 as a young girl, you have all these hormone changes, you start your periods, you get all the symptoms that go with it. And I started with that, but they just seemed really extreme. Like I didn't seem to recover from it. So as I sort of turned 15 and then went on to be sort of 16, 17, a lot of my friends around me had kind of gone through the hormonal stage and gone through the mood swings, and I never really recovered from it. It just carried on. So even when I got to the age of 18, 19, I was still behaving, or I seemed to behave as like what a 15-year-old hormonal teenager would behave like. And there was just something not right. So I went to university when I was 18, and then while I was there, I had a complete meltdown. Couldn't cope living away from home. I think it was an accumulation of the change, of the new responsibility. And I think because I was presenting symptoms at 15, my mum and dad and my family at home and my friends had learned to live with it. So they never sort of said, "Oh my God, Nic, you're really childish," or you seem really immature. It was just kind of, "Oh, that's how she is. So that's how we'll have to deal with it." And that's what they did. So when I went to university, I wasn't officially diagnosed with anything. And all this responsibility was put onto me. And I wasn't given any support with it because I wasn't diagnosed with anything. I didn't know at that point. I still didn't know.
Yeah.
So when I finished partway through the first year, I went home And then that's when I looked into counselling and getting a GP involved. And it took me, I think it was 18 months before I got a diagnosis after that, because I had to wait for the psych, because you can't be diagnosed with the sort of, you can be diagnosed with anxiety and depression and general anxiety disorders and stuff through your GP. But for bipolar and anything more than that, it's got to come from a psychiatrist. But the waiting list to see a psychiatrist was enormous. So even then, I had to wait 18 months to get an official diagnosis. However, with going to counselling and doing cognitive behavioural therapy and accessing the mental health team, I was sort of the sort of said, well, we think it's this, we think it's bipolar, but you'll have to get your official diagnosis. But from that point at 18, I then started putting things in place to help me along the way, because I was just taking it as well. I probably am bipolar, because as soon as I read all the symptoms, I was like, yeah, like when I read the page of, because when you get diagnosed with bipolar, you've got to tick 9 boxes. No, you've got to tick at least 7 boxes out of 9, and I ticked all of them. So when I looked at the page, I was like, yeah, that is definitely 100% me. So by the time I got to 18, I started putting things in place. But I mean, it was terrifying, because I didn't know what was happening. I felt different to everybody else. All my friends and family, they were so supportive. But at the same time, it was kind of, well, is this ever going to end? Am I ever going to grow up? Am I ever going to be able to respond to things like an adult? Is my thinking ever going to change? And it was really difficult. It was really difficult. And then as I got older, it became apparent that the bipolar, the mood swings and stuff were there, but there was a lot more going on for me, in the way that it was things like I struggled to keep relationships with friends. I struggled to keep relationships with boyfriends. I had a really rocky relationship with my mum and dad for a little while, again, before we understood what was going on. And then when I got to sort of the age of 20, I think I was about 24. I was 24, that's when I was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. And I'll be honest, that one was the hardest one to take, because if you look at if you were to Google borderline personality disorder, it's very much in the media and the way that it's reported on. It's kind of like, oh, it's horrendous. The bad people, they're awful people, they're manipulative, they're all these awful things, and all the books that you read about them, it's a list of everything of why I'm bad. But obviously, I'd like to think I'm a good person with just a difficult condition. And
Yeah.
it's treated differently now. It's treated differently. You know, people are sort of saying, well, rather than focus on the negatives, it's because it's a disorder and not a condition. It's changeable. I can learn to change my behaviour. I can learn to deal with it and manage it, as opposed to whereas bipolar is chemical and there's nothing I can do about it.
I can't imagine going through any of that. It must have been such a turbulent time for you. But to see, where you are now and what you've done, which we're gonna talk about in a minute,
Yeah.
it's so incredible. But I guess in order to put context behind Westlakes Hemp, which we're going to talk about soon, we have to talk about 2015, which is Storm Desmond, which,
Yeah.
I mean, I can't even imagine what that was like for you. So can you maybe take me back to that time and just describe what it
Yeah.
was like?
So I moved to Carlisle from Manchester, Liverpool. So I was working with the gangs in Liverpool, and the funding ran out for it. My project wasn't continued. Another one was set up. And I thought to myself, you know what, I've lived down in Manchester, Liverpool for a little while now. I'm quite ready to go back to Cumbria. So me and my partner at the time said, right, we'll start looking for jobs. I got a job at the Carlisle Youth Zone, again as a youth worker. And we moved to Carlisle. And 6 months into our first tenancy, we got a letter to say that they wanted to sell the house and we had to find somewhere else to live. So we found a flat in Carlisle town centre. And we had been in there, I think we moved in there on the 31st of October 2015. And on the 7th of December 2015, Carlisle flooded, to put it
Gosh.
bluntly. And so I can remember, I sat in the flat, we were looking out the window to see what was happening. The water was just rising and rising and rising. It got above the front door, so we couldn't get out, because we weren't on the ground floor, we were on the first floor, which tells you how,
Gosh.
the water
Yeah.
just kept coming and coming. It was coming up the stairs. We couldn't get out, and we thought, well, there's nothing we can do. We might as well try and get a couple of hours keep and see where we stand in the morning.
Gosh.
So we went. I think I went to bed about 20 past 4 in the morning, and I was woken up at about 7:30 by, I could hear like a motor like machinery. And I thought, oh, they must be pumping the water off the road. And I opened the curtains and this lifeboat went floating past my top window with 4 blokes with helmets on from the Royal Life, is it the RNLI? And they just sort of saw me standing in the window, and they shouted over, how many of yous? You're next. Grab what you can. So I was stood there in my Star Wars pyjamas, my Motorhead t-shirt. I didn't have a bra on. I started hunting for a bra. I had to put my trainers on, bundle some toiletries into my bag, and that was me.
Oh my God.
Out. So they parked the lifeboat up to the window, pulled me out sort of backwards, so I fell backwards. All caught on ITV. Of course, I couldn't just do it quietly. And yeah, so they dropped us off at Debenhams. Now, for some reason, I don't know what it was, but the night before, I'd thought to myself, I'm going to move the car. Because if there is a little bit of flooding, even if it was just a couple of feet, it will get into the car. So I moved the car to higher ground. So when I was dropped off from the lifeboat, because obviously they then had to go back, and they were doing every house. I mean, we were only number 4, and they'd started at number 1. And they still had 40-odd houses to rescue people from. And at that point, we were without power, we were out electricity, there was no heating. There's people in much vulnerable situations than us by a long shot. So I took myself to Wetherspoons, ordered myself a cup of tea, and I just started crying. Because it was just, and do you know what I'll never forget? When we got into the lifeboat, the smell. Because when you look at pictures of the flood, you think it's like it's water, seawater, but the smell, where it had come from, the water in our flat, it was sewage water. One of the sewage plants had flooded over, and this is partly the reason why, even though we were on the first floor and the water was just kind of a foot above our stairs, our floor, because it was sewage water, we were told that everything had been condemned unless it was up high on a shelf. We weren't able to get it back, because what they'd have to do is then take it to a landfill and spray it with chemicals, and that was it. We lost pretty much everything.
That's
so
insane.
it was really difficult. It is, and the way Cumbria is, the infrastructure, there's 2 roads. From my mum and dad's house out west in West Cumbria, there's 2 roads to get to Carlisle, and both of the roads were blocked because of flooding.
You were trapped.
There was so we were trapped, we couldn't get through. So I've been in touch with my parents. I told them that we were all right, said that we'd had to come out of the flat, and the obvious answer was, right, well, you're going to have to find a way to get here. So I think we sat in Wetherspoons, and we were keeping an eye on the roads and the traffic and keeping in touch with the police. And one of my friends, Ryan, rang me and said that he'd managed to get through on this particular road, but he was in a 4x4, and did we want him to come and pick us up? And I said, no, if you've got out, you stay at home. We'll try, and if we need a hand, we'll give you the ring. Well, we managed to get my little car, managed to get it out west, and pitched up in my mum and dad's with what we had on our backs.
I mean, I can't even put into words how much of an insane story that is. You can definitely say you've been through it. You survived flooding and now a pandemic as well. So.
Yeah, I don't do things by half. If you're doing it, you're doing it properly. Go big or go home, as they say.
Yeah, 100%. So I suppose the next question is, where do you go from essentially losing everything, and what happened next?
So as it stood, we were homeless, and we'd only been in that flat for 5 weeks. We hadn't even unpacked properly, so we had to start again from the beginning. So we moved in with my mum and dad, and we were the problem is that it sounds, I understand that there was people in the flood far worse off than me. There was people who were like really homeless in hostels. They were sleeping in schoolyards. They were sleeping in school halls. We were lucky that my mum and dad only lived 40 miles away. The problem is the jobs that me and my partner had at the time were in Carlisle, and mine was 40 miles past Carlisle. And then my workplace had said, well, because of the flood, we're only half manning everything. So I'd sort of lost my job as well. So, I mean, the impact on my mental health, it was just horrendous. I mean, I'll be honest, when I got to my mum and dad's, the first couple of days I was on suicide watch. They had the bedroom door open. They were checking on me every 20 minutes. It was just, because I think I'd felt when we'd done the move before, when we moved into the flat, I'd got a new job. My partner had started something new. We were, that was us set. We were ready to go after losing the first house. That was our new start, and our new start started with us being homeless. So it was dark. It was a dark period, and that's kind of how I realised that although I had a bit of a grip on my mental health, I could feel it coming back. I knew I could sense it, that I was in for it. That I was in for a rough ride the next couple of months. So I got in touch with my friend. She lives in America, and her dad is a psychotherapist in America, and he is able to prescribe medicinal marijuana for people. And that's who I went to get the information about CBD. And I started taking CBD, and from that in 2015, that's how I ended up doing Westlakes Hemp. But it was a really, really dark period. And I don't, you know what? If it wasn't for my mum and my dad, I don't think I'd be here.
I think the whole CBD thing is super interesting. I'm really interested in it. So I definitely want to chat about that. And I suppose maybe why you feel there's still, I don't know if stigma is the right word, or just controversy around using it in daily life. How do you feel about that, and how do you navigate that in the beginning?
Well, believe it or not, when we first started, as I said, the reason I got onto CBD is because I was recommending medicinal marijuana. But the problem in this country is with it not being regulated, there was no way I'd be able to tell what I was getting. If I went to go and get it on the black market, I wouldn't know what I was getting. And I, even as a teenager, I never dabbled with it. I didn't like it. I can remember trying it once when I was 14. It made me sick. So I wasn't ever what you would call a typical stoner. If anything, I used to shout at my friends for doing it. I used to say, what are you doing that for? It'll just mess with your head. And I was known for being, don't tell Nic we've been doing it because she'll just have a go. And when it was suggested to me, I think I was that far at rock bottom that I thought, do you know what, cannabis or not, I'm going to have to give it a go, because my antidepressants weren't working, my antipsychotics weren't working. As I said, I was on suicide watch after the storm. So it was a make or break. We might as well give it a go. So I was really apprehensive of taking it, because I thought, I don't want to live my days stoned all the time. And that's when I started looking into the legalities of it, because obviously with having a criminal justice degree, I'm not a corporate lawyer by any means, but I can talk their language. Yeah. So I went looking to see what the laws were about it, because obviously I didn't want to, having to tell my mum and dad, I'm trying this new substance and it comes from cannabis. They were really apprehensive. They were like, Nic, if it's been shown that if you've got mental health conditions, underlying mental health conditions, and you use cannabis, it can exacerbate them massively. Like, you need to be careful what you're doing. So I did a mass amount of research on it. I did loads of research on it, and I went and seen the legalities. And basically what happened is when the drugs law is very precise about what chemicals are illegal. So it's very precise in that the cannabis as a plant is illegal. And that's how it's always been since 1972. So in 2016, a new law was passed called the Psychoactive Substance Act of 2016. And previously to that, as I said, the law was very precise, but there was a whole load of new drugs came in from different countries. They were known as like plant food, bubble, meow meow. There's loads of different names for them. And they were just derivatives, and the chemical makeup was slightly different to like MDMA, ecstasy. Okay. And that's how they were getting away with it. And they were all called legal highs. You could buy them in shops. It was mental.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah. And I
never heard of that before. That's crazy.
No, at the time, I can remember hearing of them when I was like 18, 19. And I think it was, as I said, 2016 when this new law came in. And because it was basically, that law said any substance that's psychoactive, that changes the way that you think, is illegal. And obviously, because CBD isn't psychoactive, then that's made the loophole to sort of get going with it. But I think this, the as you said, stigma is maybe the wrong word, but the controversy around it is, it's quite, it's such an open question that, because the typical, when everyone walks into my office, they expect me to be sat there with dreadlocks listening to Bob Marley with a spliff in my mouth, and that's, we get that all the time. And I'm just, as you can see, I'm just not like that. I don't smoke it recreationally, and I don't really use it. What I've found is, as the more I've been in the industry, the more I've seen how bad it's made out to be in the media, and where that stigma comes from.
From the limited knowledge I know about CBD oil, because I think what some people potentially, if they don't understand, they're kind of like, oh, if I use this product, am I going to get high? But it's the THC in weed that makes you high, and then that's removed from the CBD oil to make it
No, so what we
No.
do is, no, well, the way it works is, you imagine if I asked you to grow me a tomato, the first question you're going to ask me is, what type of tomato do you want? Do you want a green one? Do you want a red one? Do you want a yellow one? What type do you want? So, and it's the same with cannabis plants. So hemp and cannabis, it's the same thing.
Okay.
And all the different plants have got different strains. So in each plant, you've got the sort of same 114 compounds. You've got THC, CBD, CBG, CBN, CBDA, THCA, 114 of them.
Okay.
And when we extract CBD, we extract it from a plant that has got less than 0.2% THC in. So that it's never there to begin with. It's just like traces. You know, when you see on food packaging, it's got traces of nuts or traces of something, but
Hmm.
it's not really enough there to do anything. That's how our products are. There's just traces of THC because the plants that they're extracted from don't have it in. Now we
Okay.
could extract. I mean, you can get plants that are massively high in THC, which is what people smoke really,
Yeah.
but they're not. That's not legal in this country. That's not
Yeah.
legal. So as long as we're getting our CBD from plants that have got less than 0.2% THC, that's how it's legal because it's the CBD that's the dominant compound.
Okay. Yeah. See, I mean, I think maybe more education around it is needed, and then people wouldn't feel so weird about it, maybe. But so
Oh,
when,
100%.
yeah. So when you were setting up your business and, you wanted to share what you learned about this with other people and help other people, how did you go about, I suppose, first, where did you get the hemp and the CBD oil? And secondly, how did you find the experience of trying to put it on the market and make people, aware and listen to you that it's not some harmful substance you're trying to sell?
So when I first went looking for it, I couldn't find. I mean, it's all just websites. So there was nothing like there was nothing local to me in Cumbria. I went looking on websites, and there was no sort of names. There was no stories behind who the people were that were making it. The prices really varied. There was bottles there for £3, but then there was bottles there for £100. I didn't know what the difference was. There was no regulating body, so there wasn't a sort of cannabis association that I could go to and find out anything about. And I ended up contacting an extraction plant in Essex. And just because I'd seen loads of good reviews about them, and when I contacted them, they didn't do like one to one. They didn't really sell it from person to person. They were really wholesalers. But they said, "We'll send you some out, and you can give it a go." So I started taking it. But previous to this, I'd bought it off some dodgy guy on Facebook.
Okay.
Yeah. So in the first instance, I bought it off some bloke on Facebook, and it could have been petrol he was sending me. I've no idea what it was. But again, because of the situation I was in, it was so dire. I'd have done anything to get help. And
Yeah.
it didn't matter what it was. Whatever was in that little bottle couldn't have been worse than how I felt at the time. And
Yeah.
I noticed within sort of 4 to 6 weeks, I'd gone from being homeless, jobless, in a pit of despair to there was a bit of life coming back to me. So things like I would spend all day in bed, 24 hours a day in bed, and I wouldn't come downstairs. My mum was fetching me food up to eat, and one day I just got up and went and sat down and had a cup of tea with her, and then I went back up, and then the next day I had a cup of tea and I had a sandwich with her. Then I went back upstairs. Then I went back down again. I had a cup of tea and a sandwich, and then I went and got a shower for the first time in 4 weeks. So just over that slow course, I started getting better. So when I
Yeah.
thought, so as I said, so I got to the point where I thought to myself, I can't work for other people. I need to work for myself. And I'd already started an online blog. I'd already started thinking, I'm going to have to be my own boss. And once the CBD started working for me, I thought, do you know what? There's people in this country could really use this. And one of my first guinea pigs, if you like, was my mum. So my mum, she broke her back in 2012. She was in a lot of pain.
Okay.
And I said to her, well, I've been doing this, Mum, why don't you give it a go? It took me 6 months to persuade her. And again, she was the same. She'd gone looking, she was trying to research it, but there was no research in this country. And that's one of the reasons the government say that they can't legalise it, is because there's no research. Well, there is, it's just not being done in this country. And I said, right, everything that I've come across, all the obstacles and stuff, that's what I'm going to tackle with my business. So we were the first company to put our faces on the website. So me and my business partner, we decided from the beginning that I was going to tell the truth, because I'd hidden my mental health a lot from a lot of people for a long time, and I got to the point where I was just, you know what, I can't, it's nothing I can control. I can't help it. It's an illness. Why should I have to hide it?
Yeah.
So I said to my business partner, I'm happy. And he sort of said, you know, you're putting yourself in the limelight there, really, as long as you're comfortable with it. Do you really want to do this? And I was like, yeah, because at the same time, we're going to make a business out of it, and I'm going to raise awareness for mental health. So the foundations of it was, we put ourselves on the website, we gave a phone number, we had an address, we had an office that people were welcome to come and see. We made sure that all of our products that we've got, we call it seed to shelf. So all of our products have got lab results where you can go and see exactly what's in the product that you're buying. They're on the website, they're free to everybody to see. And we're not allowed, so CBD is classed as a food, it's a food supplement, you know, like your vitamin C, vitamin D,
Yeah.
the vitamins that you buy. That's what it's classed as, and that's what we're regulated by. So we made sure that all the information from the Food Standards Agency was available to everybody, and that's what we built the business on: honesty, trustworthy, transparency. And I've just been really open about how I use it, and so is my business partner. Because even him, I mean, the reason I went to him with the business idea was because he was a cannabis advocate. Basically, he was a big stoner when we were in school. And I can remember him being like that, you know. And Luke's been my best friend since we were 12. It's not something that we got together through over business. We really have been friends that long. And I went to him with this idea, and even he is using THC for most of his adult life. He'd never heard of CBD before. So
Yeah.
I was the guinea pig. Then it was my mum, and then it sort of escalated to my auntie. But I got everybody involved, and we all started taking it at the same time. And I got back to the extraction plant and said, right, I want to set up a business. Will you be my supplier? And they said yes.
I suppose I'm going back a little bit, but I'm just curious. Why did CBD work for you to not cure your mental health, but manage it? What do you know? Obviously, you probably know, but if it's not too sciencey, why did it work better than, say, antidepressants or antipsychotics, as you said?
So scientifically, it's obviously a lot more complicated than this. So you've got a system in your body. Every mammal with a spine is born with something called an endocannabinoid system. And when you take CBD and you ingest it, you activate this system, and it acts a little bit like an immune system. You know, like your immune system fights off colds and viruses.
Yeah.
What this endocannabinoid system does is, imagine that it's like little soldiers marching around your body, looking for trouble, looking for problems. Where is there a problem? And it realizes what the problem is, and then fixes it from the inside out. So, for instance, I've got bipolar, which is a chemical imbalance. My brain doesn't produce enough dopamine and serotonin. So my endocannabinoid system, once it's activated by CBD, then realizes that I don't produce enough dopamine, and it gets my body to make more. So it's not the
Okay.
actual CBD that does anything. CBD activates this endocannabinoid system to fix your body itself. And if I'm speaking to a doctor, a friend of mine who's a doctor, and everyone says, well, why have we never heard of this endocannabinoid system before? And doctors only study it currently in the UK for the past, however, since 1938. Doctors only learn about the endocannabinoid system if they specialise in psychiatry, because
Oh,
it
okay.
has because that's where people find the most relief from it in terms of mental health and balance, keeping your hormones balanced. That's what they talk about it for in psychiatry. But
Okay.
apart from that, because it's been banned since 1938 in this country, there's not a lot of doctors won't have learnt about it. There was no reason for anyone to do any research because it was illegal. And
Yeah.
the research in America, especially in Canada, it shows you what it can and can't do and how it works. But essentially, that's what it is. It activates this system to fix you from the inside out.
And I think it's so interesting how it's coming. I don't know how to explain it, but like, you know, when you see it used by these massive beauty brands to put into
Yeah,
products now, and it's kind of becoming this trendy thing, but no one knows the science behind it or why it's happening. And then there's so much split about it, because it's like, it's okay if it's in soap, but if it's in an
yeah,
oil that you ingest, oh no, that's gonna
that's
make you
bad.
high.
Yeah, and that's what it is.
You know, it's so
And the thing is with the cosmetics is we've just taken on some new premises, and I'm going to start making our own cosmetics. And what it is with that is that, do you know, when I say the endocannabinoid system, those little soldiers that I'm talking about are called CB1 receptors, and you've got them in all your vital organs, and that includes your skin. So if you think, if you put a cream on your skin, you're putting CBD on into your endocannabinoid system, and that's how the cosmetics work as well. So that's why, you know, it can work for mood, pain, anxiety, because the system is in all of your vital organs, your brain, your liver, your lungs, everywhere. That's why it can do so much, and that's why it's so versatile. And that's, I think that's why you see, I mean, if you look at the market for CBD, you've got some of the brands that look like Stoner, Bob Marley, ganja leaves everywhere. Then
Yeah.
you've got people like us that have got the sort of oil, and yes, we do have cannabis leaves in our name and our brand. And then you've got other brands that have gone like full medical, and then you've got brands that are solely cosmetic.
Yeah.
So CBD, it can be used in so many different things, and because you've got CB receptors all over your body, that's why it's so that's why you can use it so much.
Yeah, it's such a fascinating topic. I think it's so interesting. And so you mentioned cosmetics there. What do you think? And you know, you've got your business up and running, and it seems to be working, and people seem to be receiving it quite well. So, what do you think the future is going to hold for you guys?
So we've took some new premises on, and again, it was based on this information and stigma and discrimination around cannabis. And what we hope to do is bring out some new products, coffee, tea, and I have
Oh,
like a little
cool.
coffee house. And on the other side is we wanted, so the other side to hemp and cannabis is that it can also be made into fabric, it can be made into concrete, it can be made into driveway paths, it can be made into fuel, you can use it for biomass. So what we'd like to do is sort of take the other route and start looking at sustainability and how hemp can sort of save the planet, really, take
Yeah.
over plastic, take over that sort of stuff. So we're going to have half of our new premises going to be a little cafe, and the other half's going to be like a refill station. So we'll have hemp flour, hemp seeds, toothbrushes made from hemp, clothing made from hemp, and be part of the hemp movement entirely instead of just having CBD. You know, there's a huge thing about using the whole plant. So if you think about the cannabis plant, it's got a stalk, it's got buds, it's got leaves, it's got stems. We want to use all of that, and all of that is what you'll see in our new premises.
That
So
sounds really
hopefully,
cool.
yeah, and the third part to it is that we've actually got a kitchen on the back of it, so we can make our own cosmetics. So I
Wow.
think the first one, I'll give you the exclusive. So our first one, it's a bubble bath, and it'll be the first one in the UK, the first CBD bubble bath in the UK. I'm working on it, and I hope to have it out by the end of January.
This conversation has been such an eye-opener for me because I've been seeing it around so much, you know, and you're always kind of curious, like, what is that? What does it do? You know, why does everyone have such an opinion on it? And I feel like you've cleared up a lot of the questions that people have. And I just want to go back to you as an individual for my last question, and then I'm going to let you go.
Go on then.
So you've obviously been through a hell of a lot in your life, and I love that you've done something so cool and so positive that's come out of potentially negative experiences for you. So if you could go back to your 10-year-old self, what's the biggest piece of advice you'd give that 10-year-old self moving forward?
Don't worry, everything's gonna be all right.
Oh, I love that.
Which is just because I tell you what, it's interesting that you asked me that question, because when I was first diagnosed, I actually went and did some psychoanalysis, hypnoanalysis. And
Okay.
basically, what they do is they half hypnotize you, and they try and get to the root of your problem. So, borderline personality disorder generally comes from a childhood trauma. That's where it stems from. And what happens is you experience something for the first time. You don't understand how, you're not mature enough to deal with it emotionally. So you deal with it however way you can, and that becomes your way of dealing with it later on. Well, for me, it was loss and grief and death, because I lost my granddad and my great grandma within 5 days of each other.
Oh my
And
goodness.
that's where it came. I didn't know how to deal with it. And of course, I was only 5. When you're 5, you're the center of your universe. So all I could feel was that my 2 favorite people in the world had left me. Where have they gone? Why have they left me on my own? Why aren't they coming back? And I had this obsession with death for a couple of years. And I sort of, my mum said it, I sort of grew out of it. But actually, that was the start of the borderline right back then. So I did this hypnoanalysis, and I actually went back and spoke to my 18-year-old self, and I could see her. Like the way that I felt, I literally had a face-to-face conversation with her. And one of the things I said to her is, don't worry, like, I put so much pressure on myself to be normal, whatever that means. And if I could go back and tell her to embrace it, don't worry, everything's going to be okay. It's not the end of the world. You will get through it. Just don't stop fighting. Don't ever give up. Don't ever give up. And the best piece of it, like when I was suicidal and stuff, one of the best pieces of advice my mum ever gave me is said, you know what, a lot can happen in a day. Always give it a day. And she said to me, if you ever feel like ending your life, promise me, for me, you'll give me 24 hours to change how you're feeling. And that is something that I've stuck by and lived by. If ever I feel that down or that desperate or in that black hole, you know, don't worry, everything's going to be all right. Give it 24 hours and see where you are after that.
Yeah, it's so true. I think it's almost always in life when things get so terrible, the simplest thing that would just make you refocus everything and really just, you know, bring it back to what's important. But as I said before, this conversation's been so eye-opening. I've absolutely loved chatting to you.
Thank you very much. I'm really pleased. I'm pleased to be here, honestly. I've had a really good chat. It's been nice to talk.
Yeah, no, your story's so interesting. Like, I love when I come across something that's so different but has so much in it as well. And as I said, was already interested in this topic. So thank you so much again, Nic. I really appreciate it.
No worries. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much for listening. And as always, please rate, share, and leave a comment if you like what you hear. And don't forget to follow @WhatIt'sLikePod on Instagram and Facebook. To find out more about Nic and Westlake Hemp, visit the links provided in the show notes. I'll be back next week with more inspiring stories, but for now, this has been What It's Like with Luce.